done. And go into presentation mode. Put that up top. All right. So, like the other training you were in, this is kind of my first iteration of this, so I welcome all feedback. But this is part of our multimedia series where we're going to have a variety of sessions that are about how to incorporate media and learning, whether that's faculty generated or student generated media. So this particular session, it's 1 hour, and we're just going to talk about the kind of bare bones of how you could approach assessing learning via multimedia and some of the pitfalls that hopefully we can avoid, and then some of the opportunities. So we won't go too much in depth in terms of what is actually available in Canvas, but there will be a part 2 of this that'll come out later in the spring that's about, how to get this done. And it'll be early in January, so that if you choose to do some assessment using media, you'll have more nitty-gritty opportunities before you actually have to do it in class. So our objectives. We're going to talk a little bit about, why to do this at all. And then we're going to talk about what kind of learning activities and what kind of assessments might be a good fit for student-produced media. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you could approach assessing those. And then I think the most important part is when we're thinking about education classes, really basically all of the classes at Curry. I mean, none of these students, for the most part, save more in IT, none of them really are anticipating that there's going to be a technology component to their courses. But from what I understand, there was a recent survey of employers in Virginia that have hired our alumni. And the only place that we're kind of coming up as deficient is in instructional technology. So with that in mind, I think there's definitely some opportunities for getting them to do things that are multimodal, because I think it just will generally help with their comfort and their skill ability to do things well in terms of instructional technology. So that's our plan. So we'll jump in. So talking a little bit about, the pros and cons. I think the biggest value, and from my perspective from online teaching, is that assignments can become pretty monotonous. So, write a paper, maybe make a presentation, maybe that presentation is live. So there's discussion boards, maybe they include media, but maybe they don't. So there's not a lot of diversity in what we ask students to do overarchingly at Curry. Now, some classes are doing more just because it fits. But a lot of classes are kind of sticking to that traditional bread and butter of education. And I think that makes a lot of sense. We want to develop our students' writing skills, but we don't have to do that everywhere. We don't have to do it all the time. It certainly would help build, again, these technology skills that the employers, at least in our state, are telling us they're hoping that teachers and working professionals will have. That it gives them an opportunity to be a little bit more creative. And for those who are afraid of technology, maybe it would help them do a little bit of problem solving, right? I have to create this thing now that's going to incorporate media. What's that going to look like for me? And how do I kind of do that myself when I don't maybe have a background or expertise in media creation? And then I think also that also forces students to think outside the box a little bit. So they know what a paper looks like. But when you say to them, I want you to create a multimodal portfolio, they start Googling, right? They start Pinteresting, they start thinking about what that might look like. And I think that's a good thing, right? I think that just kind of spikes the engagement with the project overall. But there's some really challenging practical concerns when we think about doing something like this. So, do your students have enough skill to be able to do this alone or in small groups where you're not being bombarded by questions and technical issues? What are you prepared to offer them in terms of support? So do you feel comfortable enough with what you're asking them to do and the technologies you're asking them to use that you can support them if they run into any hiccups? And then the common debate, I would say, is do you force everyone to go into media or into doing something multimodal? Or do you allow students to choose a more traditional choice, like a paper or a presentation? And there's some pros and cons in the research about that sometimes perhaps it's a little bit unfair if you allow students to have a more traditional path that they can choose, because sometimes the grades are inflated one way or the other. Like if you have the mix, you see an inflated grade on papers because it feels like the students did more work sometimes, or vice versa, there's inflated grades on technology-based projects, so like videos and different media projects, because the student was taking a chance. And so maybe it didn't go as well, but you're giving them some grace because it was multimodal. So it can get a little messy when you offer that more traditional path. And we'll certainly talk about that in a little bit. So next we're going to talk about actually developing a multimedia assessment. But before we do that, I'll pause and I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Just check in with your mouth. See how's your lunch and how you're doing, and do you have any questions so far, or do you want to add anything in terms of the value or the practicality?
So lunch is going well. So it's nice to be able to do PD while eating lunch. And then in terms of practicality, I think right now in my head, I'm thinking I have some efforts in way coming up between now and end of the semester, but looking forward to an effort that's in a new class in the spring, where the goal is going to be, it's kind of actually taking the practicality and applying it to using multimedia. So with an Ignite talk, being able to use that. So it's double whammy. So that's why I guess my interest is really peaked right now.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Well, let's circle back around to that, because when we think about the actual, like kind of thinking through an activity, we might want to actually, since it's just the two of us, we can actually talk about what you want to do. Benefit bonus. Okay, so back to the slides then. I think a lot of the considerations that I start with here before we actually start talking about assignment directions or what would be a good fit for a multimodal or multimedia assignment, is these considerations are common, right? So why are you assessing them at all? Like, what is the purpose? What learning outcome, or maybe more than one, are you hoping to connect to? How do you envision the multimedia essentially allowing them to better or strongly demonstrate whatever new skills or new knowledge that they've gained in the class? And then conversely, you have to think through, by incorporating media, am I possibly detracting from their ability to show what they have learned? And that's always a possibility. I mean, we have a real mix of students, so that does add a real challenge that we often have to think through when we're incorporating multimedia projects. And then it's important to think through what kind of technology supports they're going to need. And you have to think of that through the lens of the student, wherever they are. And so that's considering how much time they realistically need, how much they can do on their own, or if they need to be working in groups. So support can look like a lot of things, but mainly it looks like time and people, and then like technology support. Those are the three big ones. And then it's really important to think about your final rubric, and we'll talk a little bit about assessing these, and I have some resources that I'll share out with this PowerPoint. But it's really important to think about how you're going to incorporate the actual media element into your grading structure. So it's, again, a delicate balance of, if you don't put any weight on the actual like artistic creation, then they don't invest time in it. But if you put in too much weight and they have like an honest to goodness technical issue that just was not overcomable for that particular group or student, is that really fair? So thinking about how you're going to weight the technology elements of the project is a little bit complicated. And like I said, I have some examples that we're going to look at that I think will help us think that through. So I'm going to just kind of walk through an example of something that a faculty member had tried, and then we can kind of pick it apart. So the case of the vlog. So a faculty member chose to have the students do reflections every week, and there were reflection prompt questions. And rather than having them write their reflections, the faculty member had the students turn this into a vlog. And so the vlogs could be hosted publicly, and the faculty member gave some suggestions about where they could be hosted. But the students could also use the studio in Canvas because there was an assignment that they just kept turning their blog post into. So they could use the studio offering in Canvas as one of the options if they didn't want to host this publicly. And there was a rubric that the faculty member used to address the posts each week. And then at the very end of the vlogging exercise, the faculty member asked the student to do kind of a summation reflection that was going to be shared with the whole class, and that was worth more points. And so the idea behind the summation vlog was to do a final wrap up, to complement the final written project in the class, to have the students share what they learned and what projects they were working on without having to necessarily read each other's papers. And the hope was that by the end of the course and having like 15 weeks of vlogging experience under their belt, that they would be comfortable to maybe step up their game on this last vlog post. And so that maybe they could meet some higher technology criteria. And long story short, overarchingly, this met the faculty members' expectations. Most students received A's. The students who received B's or C's were missing components or did not submit the assignment on time. And overall, the technology challenges kind of faded away by week 3. So that's the story of the vlog. So I'm gonna pause there and also stop sharing for a second. And like, I know I shared a story, but like, let's think through, does a vlog assignment resonate with you? Like, what do you think about that? Doing reflection as a vlog instead of a blog or something else written? Do you have questions about the overall expectations? And do you see any weaknesses given like what we've already kind of laid the stage or talked about? Big question.
Sure. So I think I have a hard time pronouncing it. Blogging is I can spell it, but it's fine. And I think faculty member, you decide where it fits best in your class. I think something that I'm trying to be very intentional about is both sides of the feedback we've gotten in the MED program is that our students' academic writing skills are an area that we can work on enhancing. But that does not mean we can't use multimedia. So it's kind of finding that balance between that. So for example, if I were to move towards like discussion in multimedia, or an aspect of that area, maybe reflections would be an area, or journal entries where it's writing. So kind of finding that balance of, that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. And I do not think it has to be all or none. Like I don't think you have to be all one and none of the other. Like I think you can strategize and figure this out. And you can also, I feel like right now I'm thinking some discussion posts we can design that are better to be written and be a great opportunity to practice academic writing, while the other would be, discussion could be a great way to do it using multimedia. So So that's kind of where I'm thinking right now. I think what's always interesting is what is the student's perspective? So what did the students in that case study, what value did they feel like it added or detracted, or in terms of that, in terms of, challenges with technology. I think at the end of the day, we all have challenges with technology. We all have to learn. We all have discomfort at some times, but hopefully with the design team or the support team, we can get and model it. We can create a video, demonstrate it, work with students one-on-one. So I think we can help bridge that gap. I do agree with you, and I know that survey data was reflective of a lot of it, but I do think what wonderful way would it be for us as faculty members to work towards modeling the technology that's being expected to be implemented in classrooms across Virginia or beyond Virginia.
Yeah, speaking of that, the school that we're at, and Chesterfield was one of the districts that was in this survey. We're almost starting in second grade, they have a Chromebook one-to-one program, at almost every school now. And they have Promethean boards in every classroom. And I think something like 70% of the teachers were like, I don't feel I have any idea how to use this effectively. Besides being a glorified projector. And I'm like, that's so sad. There's so much more.
Yes. And I think, yeah. So, I think we have to figure that out, right? That balance, and how often do graduates from the MED program have to participate in academic writing, and what does that look like? Or should that writing be application, create an email, right? Because that's sometimes, or advice to a parent when your child's struggling in this area. Although you probably should call, but alas, doesn't always happen.
So I'm hearing you talking about writing for multiple purposes, and I think that's so critical. I frame that a little differently than academic writing, but I think it's equitably important. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's another place where it comes in.
I think you're right. I think academic writing, no, I think you're right in terms of academic writing. And then I think formal professional writing versus I'm sure there's some names out there, informal emoji writing.
Yeah.
But that's exciting in second grade. I know in kindergarten at my last school, they were using Google Classroom as a LMS. As a true LMS that provided differentiated instruction, and students do completely meet the expectation.
Yeah. I think what's also, so eventually I'm going to turn this into a synchronous online class. And so the second part of the discussion is you would see the student survey data. And so over the course of the semester, I think at 3 points, the students do a little survey about what they thought about the blogging experience. And they appreciated the fact that they had a chance to practice, but almost every student ended up changing what platform they used for blogging. And so a lot of the feedback was centered around, I wish that they had just made us use X, because they felt like they had to double the cognitive load of trying to figure out which program for them, because they had choice, which I thought was really interesting. It was don't give me a choice. Let's all learn X and let's do that really well. And then we can help each other, because if I'm using Y and you're using Z, then where does the tech learning come from in that? And I thought that was really interesting, where the faculty member was really adamant about giving choice to hopefully make everyone feel comfortable. So that was really interesting feedback. And that might vary from course to course, but it was an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
They did all feel much more confident by the end, where they had to do their final summation, but they did not rate themselves highly on their tech skills. So they felt vlogging did not necessarily, that they felt more comfortable being on camera, which was good, but they did not necessarily feel more comfortable with technology. So
yeah, I I'm wondering, hearing you say this, I'm wondering too, like, golly day, I mean, and I know it's not really our roles, but to examine the impact of that practice of articulating reflection and what that means. I don't know what the content of this class was, but sometimes that can be a struggle, and some are really good at that. But recognizing, like, what was the impact of that in their professional practice would be very intriguing, to have that opportunity to practice reflection and, like, I know it's not conversation with the school leader or instruction, whoever you're working with to enhance, but it would be that would be practice to be able to express your thoughts.
This was a writing across the curriculum course.
Okay.
So they did a lot of reflection on, the course was set up that they learned like a teaching strategy about writing, and then they were reviewing their own writing practice at the same time. And this was the only activity in the course that they did not have to do extensive writing for. So like the other major assignments where they were writing lesson plans, and then they were actually like,
right.
They were writing ironically for different audiences, but like writing in forms of like different rhetorics to, what does third grade writing look like? What does fifth grade writing look like? And it was a K-12 course.
That sounds like a great class. Now I'm like, I don't know, take it.
I don't know how reading, which owns writing across the curriculum at Curry, I don't know how they handle that. I've never seen their course, so I'll have to look into that. So
yeah, it sounds very
here because she might have had comments. So.
Yeah.
Give her a hard time for standing us up. So I'm going to go back into the presentation again, and so this is where I wanted to talk about your idea around like an Ignite talk. So obviously we can kind of skip step number 1 because this is a brand new class. So talk to me a little bit about number 2. So what are you thinking this Ignite talk is going to look like? And like, let's think about your outcomes for that course. And if I'm right, if it's that like 59, it's that new course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna bring up, are you okay with that?
I can stop sharing.
So I can talk about it a little bit. And then let me find it. Oh, it might be hard to find on this computer.
Are you looking for the syllabus or the assignment?
The syllabus, but I got it loaded in Google. So
I'm like, I think I have it because I'm on CCPRC.
You're probably right, and I've already started, refining it again. Mm-hmm. This okay. So Zoom is not letting me share. Come here, Zoom. Okay. Zoom. All right, Jenny, can you see it?
I can.
Okay. So you already.
Oh, I lied. I can see the. Oh, there it is. It's back.
Okay. So I'm working on refining it, but so the thought process is that students will work on their culminating coursework and look at comparing all their learnings and experiences from the MED program, and then that'll cross over among the pillars and their area of focus. And so with that, they're working on writing their comprehensive exam, and they're scaffolding to work toward that. I'll work on refining, but they are going to watch some TED Talks. So they'll have some modeling of a little bit about what that course looks like, and they're going to do commentaries of that. So that will provide an opportunity to see some examples, some modeling, and then I've got some examples of some Ignite talks, and then we've can access other ones. I mean, they're on YouTube, you know, they're available. So, and then hopefully we'll build a repository of student examples, which would be fabulous. And then for the Ignite talks, let's see. They're going to work on creating that, and what it'll kind of do is look at being a way to present their takeaways and thought process from their comprehensive exam. Mm-hmm. So it gives an option to make that learning visible as compared to just submitting the comp exam and it coming to the advisor and myself for reading of it, and then that being the end. So it gives an opportunity to almost create a virtual, I feel like, the way I see it is almost like a virtual gallery walk where they'll be able to share their Ignite talks. They're short, the aim is to be concise and specific. And then on the flip side of that, recognizing that there's value in being able to share your thoughts, especially in the educational setting. You don't always get the opportunity to write, so be able to articulate your thoughts. So it kind of looks at being able to accomplish both modalities, the writing and articulating. So
I have a question.
Sure.
When you give them the prompt, who do you, oh, and I feel like you just scrolled past it. Do you tell them who their audience is, or do you have them define it?
Like for the company?
Yeah, well, for their Ignite talk, is it, you know how like in a real TED talk, you might not know who's in the audience, or you might assume it's educators. It's like TED,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Or it might be your committee, right? Or it might be a future employer. Like, and then how would that and ground how they might be concise in what they might focus on versus, you know, classmates versus I'm not sure versus parents versus future employers versus peer. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just curious if that even matters to you.
Well, I think it matters to me, and I think it matters hopefully to the student. So I think the way, the approach I would take, Jenny, and I welcome your advice, but I think the value of this assignment is to be able to walk away with something that is a product that you could use, whether it is with future employers, whether it is with teammates, colleagues. I think the value of that is there. If it is for the committee, one, it's not part of our evaluation process for the comp, and I don't think it'll become part of the evaluation process because we have students who are doing the comp exam outside of this class. So the takeaway would be for whether they decide to meet employers, future audiences. And I'm okay if they choose that too, because they're going to know. So we have some students that want to go into leadership roles, and they might be interviewing, especially in the spring season, or they might choose to use it for teammates. So I'm fine too if they choose and just identify it. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of value in that part of it in terms of going to watch them and give them some feedback on them. So I find, as someone who had taught writing for a long time, when my students were unclear about who the audience was, the message got mushy. And having that clear thought about who I'm designing this for was like a kind of key piece in getting to that tight messaging that then made it much more successful than the students who were mushy, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great.
How did you anticipate that they would create it? Do you envision them?
Well, I don't know exactly. I haven't anticipated that. I have anticipated it. I have anticipated, and I have that was on the list and I were going to work on, but Ashley and I are going to work on it now. And so I recognize, I think I like the value of studio in terms of their support and their commenting features. So that, because the goal is that students will watch them too and comment as well. So in my head, I have it being done with studio.
I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, it doesn't sound like it needs to be public, but the nice thing about Studio is like they can export a public link if it was something that they did ever want to share with an audience greater than yourself or their committee or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this is not relevant to this like session at all, but as you're working with Ashley, I've recently learned about her that she was a big supporter of a tool that the college had called Digication. Are you familiar with it?
No.
It is
Digication?
Yeah, it's an e-portfolio tool.
Okay.
And I don't want to like mess you up as you're like working and refining your class, but there was a part as this class was getting created where I was like, man, it'd be really cool if our master's students came out with this like awesome portfolio at the end of this experience that included their like a brief video talk about like who they are and what they're interested in, and like, you know what I mean, like summate their graduate experience, and then they have their comp, their writing sample, and they have like sample lesson plans that they create through their time with us, and curriculum they created or whatever. Like, wouldn't that be cool? I as an employer would like love to be like, here's a link to my finished portfolio from my master's program of like, you know, concisely demonstrates everything that I learned while I was at Curry.
So I just pulled it up. Does it embed into Canvas?
It does.
So that's good, right? I mean, that seems like a strength.
It is. It is a strength.
Okay.
And honestly, why I mention it for you and Ashley to talk about, I'm not an expert. I'm not super familiar with it. I know it's significantly more robust than the built-in portfolio tool that is in Canvas, that like is Canvas.
I have a student in 5025 who's doing an e-portfolio, and I would say it's Digication because I can check the links. Because he teaches in the college. So but the commenting, maybe I'll talk to Ashley, I can't access it through Canvas in SpeedGrader. So I'll talk about that.
And that would be because we haven't integrated it yet.
Gotcha.
But you know, if we're interested in, we can integrate it in, just like we can do a massive integration, but we can also integrate it at the course level.
Well, the value I see there is, even if it's incorporated, I'll talk to Ashley because I can see the value there is that 5025 could use it. 80, you know, like the pillar courses, and then if it's self-directed, students could decide how much they add from it or not add from it from other places.
Right.
Okay.
So I throw that out there, but I mean, that's another great example of like multimodal learning, because within that you can include video, images, sample. You know, if you have like a blog or vlog that's like curated enough, you could include that. You can include different types of samples. You could annotate that. You know what I mean? Like, so there's an opportunity. But a lot of people haven't been interested yet. So I'm gonna sneak back into our slides, and I think we talked about like you know, using Studio, and that might be a safe initial space to do something like this. What kind of concerns would you have though in asking them to bring any media? What do you have concerns about the constraints on your own time and your own expertise? And what do you think that might look like?
I do not have concerns. I think like anytime I try something new, there's hiccups, and I just try to work through the hiccups and learn and refine for the next time. I recognize that I think I'll just be strategic with my scheduling and make sure I've blocked out time, or maybe even do a session, do a video modeling, but do a session of, you know, where people can log on, or partners, put some structures in place that they can help. Maybe there'll be some students who are really good at it and they could be experts, instead of they could be the tag, they can have distributed leadership. So we'll figure it out.
Distributed leadership. I like it. So I think all that's right on, and we're going to kind of wrap up with that too. And you're brave and like willing to try. You can imagine if you ever found that you had multiple sections running of this class, which would be a happy problem I would love. We'd have, I think, like a faculty member, right, who would be suited besides yourself to teach a section of this course, because you have to have that good modeling, right, and that comfort level to like help students ride out those hiccups. Because every time will be the first time for them. Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
It won't be for you, and you'll get better and better. So you'll be able to anticipate, but they'll always have the hiccups. So in the note section, and I might.
Which can I pause you on that? Am I unmuted? And I think that's something like, you're right. And I think that's something we have to identify and work with in addition to like whether it is an adjunct instructor or a faculty member, like, but it makes me think of like the work we're working towards with adjunct instructors, that that we don't want to be limited due to a skill set. And then I think you've had the idea of like building their capacity and like what does that look like? How do we do that? But recognizing that we are an online program. So just, I guess we'll continue to work on that. That's all I'm saying. But I guess I'm saying that I think that folds into the conversation we're having.
Yeah, it really does. And all of this, I think, together, right, in so many ways, because online opens these different doors. But I mean, honestly, this was not a session that's just meant for online learning, right? Because absolutely we can do this face to face. But I mean, the same rules and situations would apply. So, right. So within the notes of this slide, I have pulled together some resources that have sample rubrics for faculty who have assignments that are using some kind of multimodal or multimedia project to assess learning. And they all take a really different perspective on how to approach a rubric for this kind of assignment. But almost all of them really break out like what is the technical criteria and the purpose for that, and like why there's a media component. And then they all have a space where they're thinking about like demonstration of knowledge and demonstration of content and connectivity to content. So I think you'll see some overlap, but they all kind of approach it a little bit differently. So I think they're really relevant, helpful samples. And through those, they have, they kind of offer some additional like suggestions, basically. So for example, allowing redos, like if the technology really gets in the way, being respectful of that, if that's not the key thing, like if mastering that technology was not a key piece of the puzzle and it just got in the way, what does that redo situation look like? It's hard. One of the articles that I was looking at talked a little bit about, you want to be respectful of the students and that they tried. But on the flip side, if they didn't plan well, like if they didn't leave themselves enough time, are you just being a doormat? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's a different kind of failure on their part, right? Again, not technology or content, but rather like technology might take you longer. You don't know what to expect. So kind of other professional skills are there, and can you quickly ascertain, like, why did this fail? Like, was it time, was it lack of know-how, and can you tell, you know what I mean? Some of the rubrics have the students do a self evaluation on a media project that they submit. And I thought that that was also really helpful because it allows them to identify for themselves what they thought they did well and what didn't go well. And it helps them to like articulate how the technology experience went for them. I think it helps illuminate whether it was a time management issue or a true technology issue if something went poorly. A lot of the rubrics point to doing this as like either some kind of peer, like partner, or full group activity, and some of the pitfalls and challenges of that, right? So like any group assignment, you know, you can see certain students who, whether they feel more comfortable with technology or they feel more comfortable with the content, they end up taking the lead and being very responsible. In a media project, depending on the requirements, that lack of total group collaboration can sometimes be very evident. So there was like a pro there, but on the flip side, there could be the con of like they could get away with like one person doing all the work. So thinking that through. And then a few of the rubrics, I believe, like broke the pieces of the activity into steps. So I think I pulled this example, but if I didn't, it was a podcast example. So the students were put into groups to curate a podcast, and the podcast had to have several elements. So it had to have an introduction, it had to have an interview portion, it had to have a research analysis portion, like, you know, who said what kind of thing. And so the students in the groups were responsible for curating that written content and submitting it and getting it approved prior to the creation of the media. And I thought that was like a really interesting thing, especially when you talk about academic writing and like some of those skills you might want to develop. You know, the students go through this iterative writing process and they're writing different components and peer reviewing each other and then getting feedback from their faculty member. And then they take that and put that all together into a media project they then share with their peers. And I liked that because they had times to check in with the faculty member for several weeks. I think that whole project lasted like 6 weeks. And they were scaffolded so that if they were having, whether it was content issues or technology issues, like there were just these automatic places to check in. So I thought that was a really good example. So all those are in the notes section. I'm gonna pop out the PowerPoint to you when we're all done, so that you can have those available as you kind of think about your Ignite talk, and if you want to steal any of those components for your own use. But the last part of today's session is all about how to go about supporting students. So, you know, again, you were like, I feel pretty comfortable. We have so many faculty though who don't feel comfortable. And so these are some of the best practices that I found in terms of helping students be successful when you ask them to do something with multimedia. So the first one kind of relates back to the vlog example where the faculty member had them do shorter, lower stakes, worth less points activities that use the same technology. So that by the time the big piece, like the important, the higher stakes thing was due, they had built up a comfort level, they had received tech support, and it really decreased the anxiety that the students felt in curating that final project. So that's one way. I will add the caveat that if it is a video project, students don't really have the skill set to tie different clips of videos together. That's kind of like a 2.0 of like video editing. So like that would not work. Like that would be like step too far. But making smaller videos in advance of a bigger video, or teaching them, you know, in studio, they have very minor editing functionality that they could use, but it is there. So giving them the opportunity to use it so they develop that skill would be important. So portfolio projects are also another way. So again, whether it's low stakes or just a variety of media or multimodal projects throughout the course of the semester, so that includes some writing, some images, some annotations, whatever, they can curate, right, what they feel was the best representation of their skill set and work for the final evaluation. And then those projects often are multimodal, or they can be required to demonstrate multimodal elements, however the students choose to incorporate that. Then we had talked earlier, I had mentioned this idea of having a traditional assignment pathway, the traditional paper, for those who are, I like to say, technology averse. We have quite a few technology adverse friends at Curry. And again, that comes with those pros and cons. Certainly though, we want to make sure that we set students up for success, and we want them to feel comfortable. So even if it's not, a podcast or a video, there could be another way to make a multimodal pathway, but that's a little less intense, right, than making a whole podcast or making a whole video or editing something. It could be like a photo essay, something like that. And it feels a little bit more accessible to some of our technology adverse friends. If you're going to ask them to use any kind of technologies, the absolute best practice is with those assignment directions that you're currently curating in your syllabus, go ahead and put the directions for how to use those technologies. So there's so many videos and step-by-step directions for how to use ARC, like as an example. But if you went with a different tool or product, same, find the tutorials in advance for the students so that also you'll know what they have seen. And when they say to you, I don't know how to do this, you can literally be like, did you watch the video? Because I provided you the video. You know what I mean? Start there, right? I've given you everything that you need to do. And then last but not least, a lot of faculty have had some unrealistic expectations. So a couple of the rubrics that you might see, when I first read them, I was like, oh my God, they thought Spielberg was creating the student, this video. It was so intense about the picture quality and audio quality and all of these things. And they are important, right? If you have a student with a crappy mic, it's miserable to sit there and watch that. But we also have to be realistic that these are not film editors. There's going to be hiccups and blips. And so reflecting that in the rubric is tricky because you want to set high expectations, but they need to be realistic. So those are the key support ideas. I wanted to spend the rest of the time, and again, I was hoping it was just us, so we kind of blew through a few things, but I wanted to leave time for questions and thinking through anything around your specific project, or looking at Canvas if that would be helpful. So I give you the last 5 minutes for anything you want to talk about, or recoup 5 more minutes in your life.
So something that I appreciate, and I think I'll find it when you share the slides out, is I appreciate examples, especially when you're trying to create, pulling from different models, making sure they're valuable and viable examples. So do you have any resources in terms of that? I guess something I'm wondering is a way to have consistent so let me make sure I articulate it well. Sorry, Jenny. I guess I'm wondering, could or should we, and I don't even know if it's something that some would find valuable, and I do think there's some that would find it valuable. Can we create a repository of if you're using Zoom, we have the Zoom in the virtual community, so that we're all giving similar directions. The videos are ready. I think it creates an example of a template almost of here's what the language looks like. So then students are having similar experiences across classes, which I agree with you, like what you had said about like cognitive dissonance, like that is something we're always trying to overcome, especially in the online learning environment, because we're not there and we don't have the nonverbal cues all the time. So that's what I'm wondering, like, is there a way, like, first, I guess my one question is, does it exist and I don't know it exists and I would love to have access to it? Or two, is that something some of us can work towards? Because I can see value in, I know some in the MED program are looking at maybe incorporating Flipgrid more. And so rather than having 4 faculty create, we have that resource available. You know, does that make sense?
Totally, yeah. So I'm gonna share something with you. I'm gonna share my screen. So within Canvas, we have built a Curry Common Resources site, and it has a lot of what you are talking about in terms of common Canvas language, the most frequently asked student questions kind of addressed in these Canvas guides. We have the librarians videos that could be adopted in your course about, you know, how to do basic library functionality, library loan, journal articles, etc. It's where we keep templated pages for different things that you might need to do, like if you wanted to have a common setup for face-to-face classes, or a common page look for online classes and stuff like that. This class is shared with everyone in the Commons, the Commons that's in your far left-hand menu.
Okay, I'm navigating as you tell me.
And we haven't done a perfect job of like communicating with faculty that this is there, but that Commons is an amazing place because you can essentially, if you share just with Curry, anybody affiliated with our Curry account could see those materials, whether they be technical in nature, right, like these, or whether you wanted to share an example of a module or an assignment or assessment or something that you built that people could consider adapting and adopting in their course. And so when you find these in the Commons, you can preview them, and then you can choose to adopt any portion of them and then bring them into your own courses. So there's that piece. And that is for my independent friends like yourself who eventually like won't necessarily need a Dave or an Ashley to do something for you. But we really encourage you, especially the online folks, to actually work with the designers, because in working with you, they can start to understand what materials we need to fully develop this space. So like if we have more people doing multimodal assignments, like we might need to break this out where we have like podcasting resources, right? And like video talk resources or whatever. And then anybody who uses like that same bucket of things could be using the same directions. They'd already be curated, and we would maintain them and we would update them. So the spirit of that.
And it would be, sorry, go ahead.
No, the spirit of that is there, but no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say it, and it would increase efficiency among, so I'm trying to access it, and I'll share my screen.
Let me stop.
Meeting. I've searched here. Where do you think, can you see this?
I can.
Jenny, can you see this?
Mm-hmm. Let me, I'm going back to mine for 1 second to see. So I would say one of the downsides of the Commons is that it can be a little hard to find when things are shared and like how they're shared. Let me confirm.
So when I
go ahead.
No, it's okay. When I click the shared thing, it says I have no shared.
So that is the things that so the shared option is the things that you have shared
with comments.
Yes. I am updating how this was initially shared. It just looks like, I think they shared it originally. So I don't think he let instructors see it for whatever reason. He like, for whatever reason within it, when I'm setting these examples, because of the word curry, all of the images that are associated with it were of curry, of the dish.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Okay. I have refreshed that. So go ahead and try to search one more time. Let me watch you.
What's the name? Curry Commons?
I think it was Curry Commons Resources. Other neat thing that you can do, see, like, isn't the search a bear?
There, that
to search for is, oh, there it is.
Perfect.
And I just updated the settings. So if it gives you any hard time with preview, it just might still be loading.
Okay.
But
perfect.
You'll be able to, like, now you can like download this and put it into a cartridge for yourself. Eventually you'll have this list here where you can see what's in there, and then you can preview those items and think about what specific things that you can.
Well, this is lovely. I appreciate this. I'm glad I asked my question.
Yeah, and as you are working with your designer, or as you are thinking about things that could be, even just for CISE, like, let us know, because like we can make a module of like the most common resources need for a CISE course or the pillar courses or whatever, and we can be granular, but anything that would be helpful that beyond just you that we can put here, like we would love to do that. Because, and I know people like you, April and Chris, like would be completely confident and thoughtful in what you adopted and stuff. So that's great. And we're happy to curate it once we know you can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and this is just lovely. Yeah, that it's in a equal, we can all access it. So I appreciate that. I'm glad that filled a blind spot I had. So thank you.
You're welcome. Also, it's really cool the way that this works, because as we like make updates, like something changes and we push the updates in the course that we maintain, it just automatically gets pushed to the commons. And then in the courses where you adopted these materials, you'll get alerted that there's a new version that you could choose to accept.
That is nice.
It is very cool when it works.
I like anything that notifies me. I like anything that notifies me and I don't have to do the work. Perfect.
Did you, we're definitely in time. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. So bye, anyone who watches this. Do you